Quite. Should we discuss this further with Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley? Tim, interested to get your view on what we've heard from Rishi Sunak in the last few days and what this might mean for the debate tonight. Yes, he's been caught out for saying that he went without Sky TV, as if that was perhaps something that, I don't know, is a great sign of being hard done by as a child. And of course, the D-Day debacle. What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, growing up, we didn't have television either. We just sat around in a circle reading Shakespeare to each other. Very relatable. I find this comparison of childhoods rather tiresome, and it's what happens when there's no philosophy in a campaign. Keir Starmer is not a socialist. Rishi Sunak is not a conservative. Therefore, they're not arguing on the basis of first principles. They're not saying, I'm going to do X because I believe Y. When you don't have a philosophy, you have to reach back into biography. And that's when you start to say, I'm going to do X because growing up, I saw Y. And the problem is in that kind of competition, Rishi Sunak can't win because Keir Starmer has built this image for himself as the toolmaker's son. But I just find it so interesting how much of this campaign is dominated by family history and by memory. Ed Davies talked a lot, very movingly, about caring for his mother. He's talked about caring for his son. Rishi Sunak has told us repeatedly that he grew up on the floor of a chemist's. And Keir Starmer, if I have to hear one more time that his father was a toolmaker, I think I shall scream. But in all cases, three men who philosophically are very similar, have policies that are very similar, are all trying to bribe you to vote for them, in the absence of ideals and vision, are instead trying to sell themselves as personalities. And the sad thing is that in many cases, they don't have much of a personality to sell. We're looking at footage right now of Keir Starmer speaking to a group of people in some part of the country, I don't know where, and you'll notice the look of sheer boredom on everyone's face. Believe me, I would not be watching tonight's debate if I wasn't paid as a journalist to do it. Neither man is particularly interesting. They're running on personality. They don't have a personality. I wish they would get back to philosophy.
I think you've hit something
Absolutely
on the head there, Tim. But I wonder if there's a point of difference here in that for one of these men, they don't particularly have an ideology. For another one, perhaps they're trying to hide their ideology, that it's a conscious calculation, a decision to not run in an ideological way. They've been listening to focus groups. They don't want to say what they'll be doing. I'm talking, of course, about Keir Starmer, who, growing up, was actually quite a radical socialist. He would promote the abolition of the monarchy, talk about nationalising all sorts of things, actually not even growing up or as a young lawyer writing publications in socialist pamphlets, but even when he stood to be leader of the Labour Party, he said far more socialist things than he does today. I suppose there's a risk for people in terms of asking the question, who is the real Keir Starmer? Is it the guy that is saying all of these sort of things about his family history, designed to steer away from policy? Or is it the person who actually used to talk quite a lot about policy, about nationalising things and raising taxes?
You may well be right, and that's what the Tories are encouraging people to think, of course. I have to vote on the basis of what someone says. I can't infer what someone's going to do. And I think sometimes it's unfair to infer from people's past what it is they're going to do, because when I was young, I was a proper Marxist, right? I know what socialism actually is. Socialism
Well, hang on, Tim. Hang on. Just on that point, Tim, don't have to infer too much, because it was at the last debate where Keir Starmer was asked whether if, a relative had no other option, would he, aid them in getting private healthcare? And he said absolutely not. So he put ideology there before, perhaps the health of a relative.
Well, I'm going to be fair to Rishi Sunak and say that I don't think it's a very illuminating question to ask if he had to give up things when he was younger. He struggled to come up with an answer. He came up with a daft one. Likewise, I'm going to be fair to Keir Starmer. I think when I heard that question, I felt the question was saying, would you choose to use private healthcare? And there are a lot of people in this country who feel I was born on the NHS, I was raised on the NHS, I've invested in it, I have a right to use it, so I would never consider using private healthcare. I know a lot of people like that. But just to go back, understanding what socialism actually is, control of the means of production. When I hear people calling Keir Starmer a socialist, I'm not sure he is. I don't see much that in policy terms, he's come up with that's socialist. What I think he probably is a class warrior. I think it's a better way of looking at it, because as people have been saying about things like the tax on private schools, there's no point to it. It raises very little money. It doesn't in any way make society that much more equal. It just punishes a group of people because they could afford to do private and they choose to. I think there's a strain of class war running through Labour's bench, but I don't think it's necessarily ideological socialism.
No, and I think that's a fair point. It depends on our definition of socialism.
Well, he calls himself a socialist. Rachel Reeves calls herself a social democrat.
So John Smith called himself a socialist, but I don't think we'd say that he's in the same vein as Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Oh, Tim's disappeared. But I do think that there is something in this, that Keir Starmer is actually much more of a traditional Labour leader. He's not a Jeremy Corbyn, but he's not a Tony Blair. He's somewhere. He's a Neil Kinnock or a John Smith.